What's going on, world? It's your main man, the author. Right back at that ass again. Here's another one. Just want to make this brief video, man. I was thinking about something, man, the other day, and I might entitle this video "Most Thugs Are Idiots," man. Um, I I was just thinking, and this kind of rolls into some other things too. Just like with the when I watched the Frank Lucas story. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Frank Lucas, but he was a drug dealer in Harlem back in the late '60s, early '70s, and he made hundreds of millions of dollars selling heroin because it messes you up from heroin, but it's heroin. To basically to minorities and people who lived in those communities. Uh, yeah, so pretty much he didn't, they're not going to allow uh, black drug dealers to sell to too many white kids. I mean, yeah, to a certain amount, but it's not like he's going to get the Jewish community strung out on heroin. They're not going to buy from him. They're not going to be the main supplier. He could only go as far as he goes by selling narcotics to poor minorities, which most of us probably are already aware of. But anyway, that's not my point. The point I want to make is that someone said in the video, I think that they always say anytime there's a big drug dealer like a Frank Lucas or an Alpo, who was a drug dealer from Harlem as well, or Maserati Rick. I think he was from Detroit. Whenever you hear about big drug dealers, you always hear about how smart they were, and if they had of actually applied themselves, that they could have been probably Fortune 500 business owners. They could have been like the guys who the guy who ran Ford and Microsoft. They could have been successful billionaires if they had just did the right thing. And I just think that that's so much horseshit, man. And I think a lot of these, when you look at the black community, and then, like I said, there's thugs in every race. I mean, Italians and the Irish mob, and the Jewish mobs, and the Italian mafia. But I mostly talk about the race that I'm from, because I obviously have closer ties to that. When looking at the black race, a lot of these black females gravitate toward these dudes because of their quote unquote street smart. I remember I had a black female teacher in the ninth grade, and it was this guy who was in our class. He got poor grades, and I always got pretty high grades in the class. And she was like, "Well, if he apply himself, he could be smarter than you." So she was saying if that guy who was the underachiever, if he actually applied, she was trying to like say how smart he was, and that if he actually apply himself, he would have higher grades than I had. And I think we took the same test, and I got like an 88. He got like a 30 or something like that. My point is, black women always try to throw up pom poms. A lot of them, they'll try to root for these thugs or these underdogs and things of that nature, trying to say how smart they are, X, Y, Z, and the third. When I grew up in the inner city, and I grew up with the guys who, I'm not saying they became like a Frank Lucas, but the guys who were like that, like those guys in terms of, being vicious and selfish and self-centered and not really caring about the community, like the thugs, the guys who are like that, because you're only going to have like one or two Frank Lucases, but the guys who have that type of core in them, where they're vicious, or they're quote unquote bad because they break the law and they have disrespect for pretty much everyone. When we were growing up, because if you're in the inner city, you have to go to school with kids like that. And I remember most of the friends I hung around with, man, or most of the young kids I had no choice to hang around with at the time, they all had horrible grades, man. horrible grades. I mean, E's and D's and everything, bro. And just like now, but back then, the kids they always had what they said sound like it was intelligent, like they always had something smart to say, so to speak, where it sounded like probably something that they probably mimicked something their parents said. But the ones who sounded like they were smart and they had the street knowledge and the street sense in school, they were idiots, man. C's, D's, always failing. Uh, a guy I hung around with as a kid, a young friend of mine, his brother hung around. His best friend was this gangster who had gotten killed. They all grouped up and beat him to death with bats and 2x4s. It was a real big story in Rochester back in the day, and I guess he was best friends with this guy, and he was telling us how he, if he caught. At the time, he was 6 years older than us, and me and the guy that was my friend's older brother. He was saying how if he caught me or him in the gang, that he would kick our ass, like being a brother to us. But I didn't even know he knew that guy. I'm like, man, you don't seem like that type of dude. But my friend got his report card, and the guy's name was Ed. They called him Ed. It was Eddie. And my friend was like, because me and him got the best grades out of all three. He was the smartest of the three brothers. The oldest one was Ed. Then you had Mike. Then you had him, David. And he always got the best. Me and him always had better grades than the other three. And he was like, look at Ed's report card. Like, you could pretty much spell his name with his report card. And then the report cards, it was what you got back from school after so many months to track your competency as a kid, when you're in school. And he said, yeah, you could spell Ed's name in his report card. Look, E-D-D-D, every subject, English, math, science, E-D-D. And this was always, and this guy, Ed, he was always had something to say in terms of like if you see something on TV, if you talking about RoboCop, you might say, okay, well, that guy, seemed like he got killed worse than that guy. He would always argue you down and drive his point home. Like he was always smarter than you. And I guess that was a big brother type thing, because in some ways, his big brothers were like my big brothers because I used to hang around him a lot. But my point is, when it came to actual grades where being smart counted, he had E's, D's, and D's, man. And when he finished high school, he wanted to go to the Navy, but his grades were too low, so he had to go to the Army. But my point is, man, a lot of street, and I'm not saying he was quote unquote a street dude, but he was friends with one of the worst dudes in the city. So, but those type of dudes, those street dudes, the ones who go out there and hustle and sell drugs and gangsters, those guys are horrible in school, man. When you're a kid, the only record we have to quantitate or qualitate your intelligence is through your report card. Check, because you're not going out there, you can't work a job. You're not, all you can do is stay your kids. All you can do is stay home, do what your parents tell you. So pretty much the report card shows if you're intelligent or not. And a lot of those guys, I only knew one guy who actually ended up selling drugs, but he was a intelligent in school as well. He was in a higher class. He was taking more advanced classes than I took, and he was a smart guy, man. He was in advanced classes, and then he ended up selling drugs. But I think he just pretty much sold it because his father, I think, was in that, and he wanted to make the extra money. And I know unemployment was high for blacks during that, especially black males during that time, in terms of and I probably still now unemployment is high for teenagers. But he, not to justify what he did, he was still wrong. But yeah, he sold drugs, man, and he didn't really have to because they had a nice place. But yeah, he kind of followed in his father's footsteps. But I never saw his report card, but I know he took higher classes than what I was taking. So, but most thugs that I knew of, they're in either the same classes or lower classes. A lot of them were in lower classes than I was taking, right? Because I was always taking classes somewhere in the middle. So they were in the lower classes, and they were still getting E's and D's. Being in the lowest classes, still getting E's and D's, D's and E's. So they weren't smart guys. So I don't know where people get this notion that these guys who go out there and sell drugs, make money, that they can somehow become Bill Gates if they just applied themselves. No, man, these guys were idiots. Most thugs are idiots, bro. My ex worked in those juvenile facilities, and she said a lot of those guys they can barely count to 10. She asked one of the guys, because she was a juvenile corrections officer. She asked one of those juvenile inmates, since you can't really count, she asked him, well, since you can't really count, and you can't really count your 20s, your 5s, since you can't really count, how do you make money out on the streets? And he said that he only takes ones. So he can count those, but he really couldn't count the $5 bills, the $10 bills. He really had a hard time counting bigger bills. Like a lot of these guys are they're not staying in school past 8th or ninth grade, and they're in the lowest schools. Most of them are coming from the what do you call those? The Title I schools, where 95% of the kids are from the inner city. So they're coming from the lowest performing schools, which are the easiest schools to get through because you have inner city schools. I never really had to study at all. I didn't even do homework going through inner city schools. They were that easy. I didn't have to start doing homework until I got to college. And then at the end of my high school career, I started taking some Regents courses that required some homework. But up until that point, and I chose to take those more advanced courses, but up until that point, I never had to do homework, and I was still pulling B's and A's in a lot of my classes. And if I pull a C, it's because I really didn't care, or I wasn't even showing up to classes. But a lot of these guys, they go to class, they still pulling D's and E's, so they end up dropping out. They either asked to leave, or they end up dropping out because every grade tells them that they are stupid. When you pretty much get a D or an E, and some teachers have actually told their students that they were stupid. They need to stop being clowns. So my point is, the black community looks up to a lot of these thugs, and these thugs are idiots, man. A lot of them don't know A from B. And the street smart thing, you can't apply that to no other corporation. You can't apply that mentality anywhere else except for the street. I mean, the only thing that you can take from street knowledge is pretty much independence, knowing that you have to do it yourself. But as far as working in a team environment and having to show up at work at the same time, being punctual, they don't have any of those basic skills. And some of them don't even know a 1 from a 2, man. They can barely count to 10. They can barely read. They can't read out loud. And we base their intelligence by saying, well, they can cause fear in the streets, and you guys who aren't street guys, I heard one guy talking about you can't make people don't fear you, so they won't pay you, and it's like that dumb shit that they say like that. I mean, because part of that may be the truth in terms of the street, mentality, but in terms of intelligence, you can tell they don't have any. That's why a lot of times too, when even basic common sense, And a lot of those guys made that money back then, man. They didn't invest it or put some to the side or use it to have grocery stores in the inner city. Like a lot of these guys now too, and even back when I was going to school, they'll get arrested. I thought my phone went off. Yeah, they'll get arrested or something like that, right? And they'll say they have all this money. Like even today, they'll show their money on the internet, right? And then they get arrested, and then they don't even have a $1,500 bill. It's like, where's all this money that you flashing, and you don't got bail money, and bail ain't even high. They even did a special saying a lot of the kids who end up going to Rikers Island, a lot of them are in there and end up being in there 1 or 2 years, and they bail ain't nothing but $1,500. And I'm like, but they are part of these crews, these Bloods or Crips that talk about, honor and loyalty, and we got your back and all that. But your people won't even get together to put together $1,500 to get you out. And you flashing all this money. Like, where's the money when you really need it? How are you making the money? And what they don't know is getting money is important, but it's more important to know how to use money to your benefit. Meaning using the money so it can make you more money. Investing and knowing how to use money. Most of our people the biggest problem is not knowing how to use money. Because knowing how to use money to your benefit is the only thing that's more important than getting money. If you don't even know how to use money, then that money could be like fire, man. I mean, yeah, it can be used to cook. So you can have something to eat to nourish you for food if you know how to use the heat. But if you don't know how to use it, it can burn you up. It can kill you. And money has that will reverse effect. And a lot of our people don't really know, and poor people in general don't really know how to use money to their benefit. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm trying to learn myself, but that's a truism, right? Just like with the one lady who sued the football player, she made up, getting a little off topic, but she made up a story saying that the football player raped her in the community college or in the school. The school believed her, gave her the $1.5 million, right? Then the guy went ahead and contacted her on Facebook, asked her why she lied. I think after he got out, she said she can't tell the truth because she'll have to get the money back. He recorded her, gave it to the courts. The courts found out that she lied, reversed the decision, sued her for $2 million. But what they find out? Well, they find out that the 1.5 million in just a few years, she blew all that money and she was back on the welfare. So she had money, but she didn't know. She never was taught. She didn't know how to use money. And a lot of women mess money up, especially black women. They the quickest to mess money up. But yeah, I just wanted to. But the video is about most thugs. The topic is most thugs are idiots, man. And they are. They're idiots as little kids. I've met only one out of a lot of thugs that I knew, man, that actually was getting decent grades in school. Because any kid can mouth off and make it seem like they're smart, but where it really counts, they're not intelligent. They're idiots. All of my black friends always had higher grades than, especially all the black males. So it's just like I don't know where this stereotype comes from. Whereas if the black drug dealers were to only apply themselves, then they would be rich. And then that's the thing too, because our community will focus on the ones who are horrible. Like I noticed this when I was teaching in a Title I school. But the kids who are good, they don't really get a lot of attention. You give all the attention to the kids who ain't shit, or the ones who aren't gonna perform, or the underachievers, and you don't give as much attention to the good kids. the ones who are actually getting good grades, which is why we have a backwards community, which is why we're on a downward spiral as a people. But yeah, I thought about that, man, about the thugs being looked at as intelligent and street smarts. Street smarts have no place in the real world, man. Street smarts means absolutely nothing. It doesn't go past the streets. You can't apply it to anywhere else. You can't apply it to corporate America. They don't care about the street smarts, the code, and most of those this code, the street code is bullshit anyway. Because once they corner these guys, once the cops corner these guys and say, okay, you're facing this much time, they're gonna tell. And there is no loyalty, or very little loyalty. Loyalty just extends as far as you can see a motherfucker. If he's out of your distance, you can't trust him. So I just want to make this video, man. Be sure to like, subscribe. Leave your comments, especially if you're from the inner city, or what do you think about the whole thing with the street smart myth and thugs being intelligent and things of that nature. And especially from the inner city, because it's a stereotype that all blacks who come from the inner city are thugs, which is not true. There's different types of individuals. There's like the Wire talked about there being stoop kids and there being street kids, but it's really more complex than that, because you do got the kids who the parents keep the kids in the yard because they don't want the kids interacting with the kids in the street, because the parents feel that the area is not that great. So if the kid goes out into the street, the kid will intermingle with kids who aren't kids who behave well. But you do have those type of kids, but you have kids you have the athletes, the artists, the rappers, the singers, the poets, that are allowed to go out in the street. And then you got the thugs and the drug dealers and the pushers. And, earlier on in the black community, the thugs and the kids the artists didn't really interact as much. Thugs kind of stayed to themselves, and your artists stayed to themselves. But then over time, that dynamic began to change. And then we had a promotion where somehow, from some outer force, I think as well, that being an idiot and being backwards and being vicious and violent was promoted for the black community. That was promoted. That was, people backed that agenda. It's okay for blacks to, to be backwards and to not compete, because they know if you're backwards, you're not going to be able to compete with other races for resources. So yeah, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment. What do you think about the whole thugs being intelligent myth? And this is your boy, this is your main man, the author, and be sure to let me know what you think. All right, y'all be safe.